Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time. This is the last class of Masechet Avoda Zara. This is our 11th class, and today we are going to be learning Daf 71 through 76, and we are going to be finishing the Masechet today. Be'ezrat Hashem will have an opportunity at the end to maybe speak a little bit about this Masechet and what it meant to you. For those of you who I hope are interested, next week we are beginning the next Masechet, which is Masechet Horayot. It is a very short Masechet, 14 pages. However, each daf is extremely long. So just be prepared for that. So we will begin next week. I'm not sure if you have to register again, or maybe we spoke about rolling registration. So I hope everyone will be registered for that for next week. Okay, let's begin on Daf 71. Okay, we have a Mishnah, and the Mishnah tells us, again, we are discussing yayin nesech. If you remember, yayin nesech is wine that we are concerned that it was used as a libation for idolatry. So now we're going to come up with different cases. So the Mishnah on Daf 71, it tells us that soldiers come into a city. We assume they are not Jewish soldiers, again, idolaters. Now, the Gemara, the Mishnah mentions, if it's in a time of peace, so then any open barrel we assume was used for libation for idolatry, and therefore it is forbidden to drink from it. And anything closed you can drink from, because we assume that they didn't open. If you open a barrel, it's very difficult to close it. However, if it's during a war, then both of them are permitted. Now, one would say, wait a minute, why would it be permitted? So we explained that if you're in the middle of fighting, there really is generally not enough time to, pour out some libations for their idols. They're probably just thirsty and they're just going to drink and move on. Therefore, the Mishnah tells us that it would be permitted to drink from those barrels. The Gemara explains that if the city was conquered, unfortunately, this is just a terrible reality. But we were talking about the wine. The Gemara says that actually if a city was conquered, the women who live in that city, we assume that the women were violated. And therefore, if they are married to Kohanim, to priests, we say that they are forbidden to their husbands, because basically we assume that there was a violation of these women. Okay, the next Mishnah says, let's say you have a Jewish worker who's working for a non-Jew and he gets paid with wine. Now, again, the wine of the idolater is yayin nesech. So the Mishnah says that before the person gets paid, they can say, listen, I don't want the barrel of wine. Can you give me the value instead of the barrel of wine? But if they already accepted the wine, so then they're not allowed to trade, because once they accept it, it becomes theirs. And then if they're trading, then they're getting benefit from the wine that is forbidden. So Gemara explains, you can ask a non-Jew to pay for, let's say, the government tax for you, and they can use yayin nesech to pay for you, because the Gemara explains that the person could have paid themselves. So because they could pay by themselves, and this person is paying for them, so it's as if they're not really getting benefit from that forbidden wine. Okay, next Mishnah. If you sell wine to a non-Jew, if you agree on a price before it was measured out, again, in the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, Let's say you'd have a store that was selling wine, so there's a big barrel. Let's say you say, oh, I want a bottle full of wine, or I want a flask full of wine. So they would measure it out from the barrel and pour it into the flask. So if you agreed on the price before it was measured out, so then the money that you get is permissible. It's okay. But why? Because the wine becomes the non-Jews before it becomes yayin nesech, right? They haven't touched it yet. They didn't do anything with it yet. But if you measure out the wine first into the flask, so then it is problematic if you didn't agree. Excuse me. If you didn't agree on the price beforehand. So now the Gemara is going to explain. If you remember, and this is a good review from previous Masechtot, we talked about a kinyan, right? A kinyan is a way to acquire something. And we talked about different ways that we acquire things. The main kinyan that Jews do is called mishicha, right? When I pull something towards me, right, then it shows that it's mine. So now the Gemara is asking, what is the proper or the legal way that a non-Jew can acquire something from a Jew? One opinion is mishicha, right, taking the wine. Or once maybe that's not enough of a kinyan, of an acquisition. So the Gemara explains that it depends which utensil the wine is going into, meaning is if we're pouring the wine into the non-Jew's utensil, then as soon as it enters the airspace of that utensil, it becomes his. And only when it reaches the bottom of that utensil does it become yayin nesech. Remember again, the yayin nesech was only when the non-Jew touched the wine or moved the wine, not when it goes into his utensil. So now it depends who's holding which utensil, right? Which kli. If the non-Jew is holding the kli, so then what we just mentioned is true. But if, let's say, the utensil is on the floor, so then he didn't pick it up, right? You're just pouring wine into a utensil. There's no mishicha. And therefore, when the wine goes into the utensil, it becomes yayin nesech, because remember, it goes all the way to the bottom. It becomes yayin nesech before he acquired the wine for himself. And this is actually a machloket, which we saw in previous Masechtot, that if the utensil of the buyer is in the property of the seller, does he acquire the item, right? So let's say, right, see, it's hard because like shopping carts don't really work. But let's say I bring a bag from home and I go to the supermarket and I put apples in my bag. Do those apples become mine because I put them in my bag? But I'm still in the store, right? So does it mean that I have to leave the store? That shows that it's mine, right? Payment. Again, all of these things are discussions that we've had previously in terms of what is the proper kinyan, the proper way to acquire items. But here, actually, we're talking about how a non-Jew will acquire an item. Let's say so the Gemara gives another case. Let's say you bought scrap metal. We actually saw this previously in this Masechet. You bought scrap metal from a non-Jew, and then you're going through it and you find like a metal idol in there. So then you throw it into the Dead Sea, right, into Yam HaMelech. That's showing that you're not going to get any benefit from it. And you say that this is in Hebrew what's called a mekach ta'ut, right? This is an invalid transaction, right? I didn't want to buy an idol. I just wanted metal, right? And you sold me an idol. And therefore, right, if I didn't pay for it yet, it's fine. If I paid for it, so then it looks like I bought an idol. And therefore, right, we have to make sure that we don't get any benefit from that idol. Let's go back to the wine case. if you prepaid for the wine, we said that it was permissible. Now, if he did mishicha, right, if he pulled or acquired the wine before they agreed on the price, right, you might not want the transaction to happen, and therefore that transaction is invalid. It's not a proper kinyan. Let's say that so the Gemara brings a few examples where mishicha for a non-Jew isn't seen as an acquisition. The case that's brought is if a non-Jew steals something that's worth less than a pruta, right? Pruta is like the lowest denomination, right? You could call it like a cent, maybe 5 cents. Well, let's say, right, a very low amount. So if a Jew steals less than a pruta, it's not considered stealing. But if a non-Jew steals less than a pruta, it is considered stealing. And here we say, that as soon as he that mishicha is not seen as a kinyan, and then the Gemara says at the top of Daf 72, actually mishicha is considered a valid acquisition, a valid kinyan for a non-Jew. We have another case. The Gemara says, let's say a person says, if I decide to sell my land, I'll sell it to you. And they agree. They say, great, thank you so much. And then he goes and he sells it to somebody else. Now, is that okay? Is it not okay? Right. So the Gemara says the first person actually gets the land because he was promised the land beforehand, or maybe no, because they didn't agree on a price. Therefore, it's not his, right? And here, this is brought as an example of what we just said before. Once you agree on a price, it's as if you've made a deal. If I don't agree on a price, you haven't really made the deal yet. Right, so the Gemara says you have to agree on the price in order to acquire the item, or maybe that's only for yayin nesech, but not necessarily for something else. Let's say the person pulled, right, if a person pulled another person with all of his wares on his back into his own domain, that's not acquiring, right? That's not how we acquire something. But if they agreed on a price and then he brought those wares into his house, then that is an acquisition. So again, you have to agree on the price and then acquire the item, right? If they agree to sell, back to the case, like I'll sell you my land. If let's say he said, I'm going to sell you my land for 100, and then he sells it to somebody else for 120, right? So he made more money. So one opinion is that's okay because he made more money. So then that is okay to say that sale is valid as opposed to the original promise that he made in the first place. Okay, the next Mishnah tells us that we have a case of a person pouring wine into a non-Jew's flask, and he's using a funnel, right, to pour it in. And then he poured wine into a Jewish flask, right, again, using the same funnel. If there was wine from the non-Jew's flask still in the funnel, the wine in the Jewish flask becomes forbidden, right, because he's transferring that wine into the other flask. If you're pouring wine from one vessel to another, the one being poured is permitted, and the one being poured into becomes forbidden. Okay, and now the Gemara is going to explain the concept of nitzok. I think we've mentioned this before. Nitzok literally means a stream, like a stream of liquid. And there's a machloket, again, right? Think about the best example is like thinking about like pouring honey, right? If you're pouring honey from right, it's good for Rosh Hashanah, right? You're pouring honey from the jar into the honey, right, into the honey dish. Now, when I pour from, we'll call it the top vessel into the bottom vessel, so now I have a stream of honey that's connecting the top and the bottom. Now, the question is, let's say the bottom is either forbidden or impure, right? We'll call it problematic. Does the stream connect the bottom to the top? And now the top thing is also seen as forbidden, right? Obviously, if I take forbidden wine and I pour it down into something, it becomes forbidden. I poured it in. The question is, can that forbidden nature go up as well? Okay, obviously, the liquid is only going in one direction, but the legal concept is that if it's a direct flow, then maybe I see it as connected, and if something is connected, it does transfer prohibition. Okay, so that is the concept of nitzok, and it's a machloket if it's considered connected, right? The Hebrew word is chibur. Is nitzok a chibur, right? Is it seen as connecting the two things or not? So the Gemara tries to prove one way or another from our Mishnah, right? So our Mishnah says that the wine is forbidden in the funnel. Remember again, permitted wine, funnel, prohibited wine, right? And we said that the funnel now becomes prohibited, right, when you move it to something else. So one opinion is, why is it forbidden? Oh, it must be because of what we just mentioned, nitzok, right? You're pouring, and it's connecting the forbidden to the permissible, and therefore the funnel becomes prohibited, or the wine there. The Gemara says, wait a minute, no, that's not necessarily the case. Maybe, right, the funnel actually touched the wine in the flask, right? You know, when you put a funnel into a container, so, right, when you fill it up, the wine is going to get, right, the yayin nesech, the prohibited wine at the bottom, is going to touch the funnel, and that's why it's prohibited. And maybe if it doesn't touch it, so then it would be permitted. And therefore, it is not a proof that nitzok, right, that pouring is a connection. Also, another way, let's say you poured it in short spurts, right? If you pour a little at a time, there's no constant flow. Therefore, we don't have the concept of nitzok. Therefore, we can't learn from here. Okay, let's say, therefore, the rabbis told the Jews that when they were selling wine to the non-Jews, they should pour it in short spurts, and therefore it won't be prohibited. That seems to imply that if they didn't do that, right, and if they poured in one flow, it would be prohibited, right? That seems to be a proof that nitzok is a connection. Okay. Another case. Let's say you used a siphon, right? So a siphon is, right, where you put like a tube, one on each side, and you kind of suck it in, and then the wine goes from one to the other. So if the non-Jew touched the end of the siphon, right, like the end of the pipe, so then it becomes forbidden, right? Again, that shows that, right, that liquid, if it connects it, is seen as a connection. Or no, it's as if he touched the whole barrel of wine. It's not about chibur, it's not about connecting, it's about saying, oh no, it's as if he actually just touched the whole barrel of wine. The Gemara talks about drinking out of this huge vessel that had many straws coming out of it. Made me think of like some big cocktail, that comes in a big thing and everyone has a straw. So let's say you're drinking Jews and non-Jews, which is fascinating because, and we'll talk about this a little bit at the end, right? The whole point of this Masechet is that you should not be drinking with the non-Jews. But okay, so the Gemara says, let's say you're drinking out of this big like punch bowl and everybody has a straw. So it says you can drink if they're non-Jews drinking out of the same vessel, but the Jew needs to stop drinking first, right? Because what's this? It's exactly as Ilanit just said. It's like backwash, right? What's the idea? When you stop drinking from a straw, the rest of what's in the straw goes back in, right? So now the non-Jew, when he drinks, if it goes back in, it'll make the whole thing yayin nesech. And therefore you can do it, but you have to finish first. I don't know how you time that. If the non-Jew finishes first, the whole thing becomes forbidden. Okay, Daf 73, as we said, yayin nesech is forbidden, and it makes everything that it is poured into forbidden, even if you pour a little bit, right? And this is when we're talking about wine going into wine or water going into water, right? It seems this water was also used as a libation. Even if it's a little bit, it becomes forbidden. Remember, we talked about in Hebrew, it's called min bimino, right? When it's the same thing being mixed with the same thing, right? Wine going into wine, water going into water. When you have the same substance, then even a little bit is going to make it forbidden because the taste is the same, right? I can't taste the difference between yayin nesech and regular wine, and therefore, just a little bit is going to make it forbidden. However, if you add yayin nesech, forbidden wine, into water, or forbidden water into wine, that is if it gives flavor, right? Again, the statement in the Mishnah is min she'eino bimino, right? If it's not the same min, if it's not the same thing, then when does it become forbidden? Binoten ta'am, when it gives a flavor, right? When I can taste it, that's when it becomes forbidden. Okay, so now the Gemara explains, right? Let's say you have yayin nesech, which is forbidden, and you pour it into a cistern of a lot of wine, which is permitted. So the first drops seem to be okay. So this Breita says that when you pour this forbidden wine into the cistern, the first drop becomes nullified to the permitted wine, right? Because it's just a drop, right? As we say, a drop in the bucket, right? It's just a little bit and it becomes nullified. Therefore, it's permitted. Now, we just said the opposite, if you were paying attention, right? In the Mishnah, we said forbidden wine into permitted wine, even if it's a drop, makes it prohibited, right? It makes it asur. So how does this source say that it is permitted? So the Gemara explains that our Mishnah is actually the opposite. It's that if you're pouring permitted wine, right? Wine that's okay, into wine that is not okay, that becomes forbidden right away, right? Let's say kosher wine goes into, let's say you have kosher wine going into forbidden water. Again, it was used for idolatry. That is forbidden, right? So if forbidden things fall into permissible things, then we're going to go by the taste. If a lot falls into the cistern, that's already a problem. And now we have the concept called ro'in, right? Ro'in literally means like we look, we have to see. What do we have to see, right? If we have to, right, again, we have to see if water, right, water and yayin nesech falls into a cistern of wine. Now, the wine is permitted, So now what do? We ignore the permitted wine, right? The volume of the permitted wine. If there's more water than the yayin nesech, so then we say, right, it's basically water mixed with wine, and it's not the same species, and therefore it becomes nullified, right? If there's much more water and a little bit of wine, so it becomes nullified. Right now, that's only if the water fell in first. But if not, then it's the yayin nesech plus the permitted wine in the cistern, and then wine and wine, as we said, that becomes forbidden right away. Okay, let's say you have yayin nesech and water that fell into the cistern. If the yayin nesech fell in last, so then everything is prohibited. If the water, hold on a second. If the water fell in first, so then it's okay. So now, if the water fell in, hold on one second. Okay. If the water fell in last, then it's okay. Because again, maybe we're looking at what's the last thing that fell into this mixture. Or maybe that's not what we're going to look at in terms of these mixtures. If you remember, we've had a case where you have like sourdough starter, right? In Hebrew, it's called seor. Seor in the Gemara, it's called seor. Also in the Torah, it's called seor. Let's say the seor fell into dough. Now you have permitted starter, right? Leavening agent, and you have forbidden leavening agent, right? Let's say one is from truma and one is regular. So you go, right? So now the Breita says you go according to the last one that fell in. That's what finished it up, right? So that's like our case. Maybe you look at the last, or the Gemara says, wait a minute, it depends how much there is of each, right? It's not about last or first, it's about volume. Or maybe it depends, let's say the truma fell in first. If I removed it and now I put in the other one, then maybe it's okay. But if I didn't remove it, then it would be problematic. So now the Gemara tells us that there's a machluket if we go according to this concept of ro'in, right? Again, ro'in was where if we have, let's say, 3 things that get mixed up, I might be able to like take out one of those, kind of put it on the side, and then see if the 2 things that are coming in, right, do they nullify each other or do they make each other forbidden? So there's a machloket if I can ignore one part of that mixture. One second. Okay. Then the Gemara concludes that at the bottom of Daf 73, for all forbidden mixtures in the Torah, right? Anytime we have a forbidden mixture, if it's in the same species, right? Same things, right? Min b'mino, then even a small amount makes it forbidden. If it's min she'eino b'mino, if it's 2 different things, then it's about the flavor that it imparts. Okay, or the Gemara says it could be that we are extra stringent for yayin nesech and tevel. Tevel is, right, produce before you separate trumot and maasrot, right, the gifts that were given to the priests and the Levi'im, that maybe only in those cases, min b'mino, right, if it's the same thing, then it would be just a little bit, and maybe with other things, it could be that it is about taste and not just about a little bit. Okay. Daf 74, the Mishnah tells us the following things are forbidden, and they never become nullified. What are these things? Yayin nesech, Avoda Zara, idolatry, the hides of animals that were used for idolatry, Shor Haniskal, this is the ox that killed a person, and the court declared that it needs to be stoned. So till it's stoned or afterwards, it is forbidden, right? So let's say if it gets confused with a herd of other cattle, actually they all become forbidden because you're not allowed to get any benefit from it, and I don't know where it went. Egla Arufa, the same thing. We had that in last week's Parsha, right? Egla Arufa, the calf that's killed because a person was killed on the road. The birds that are brought as the sacrifice for the mitzorah, for someone who has leprosy, the hair of a nazir, the firstborn of a donkey, meat and milk, the goat that is sent away on Yom Kippur, and an animal that was not sanctified, that was slaughtered in the temple, right? All of these things, what do they have in common? You're not allowed to get any benefit from these things. Because of that, if they get mixed with other things, all of those things become prohibited. The Gemara explains that we actually need two factors. One is that the item is very important. It has significance in and of itself, and it is forbidden from getting any benefit from. Okay, next Mishnah. Yayin nesech, as we said, that fell into a cistern of permitted wine, right? Everything is forbidden to get benefit from, or maybe you can actually still sell the whole, again, it's like a whole vat of wine. So you can sell the whole thing except for the value of the yayin nesech that fell in, right? Again, you're not allowed to get any benefit from this wine. Therefore, you can't sell that particular wine, but everything else, maybe you can. So now the Gemara explains that this is only for a barrel of yayin nesech that got mixed with other barrels of permitted wine, but wine that actually got mixed with other wine, everything is forbidden from getting benefit. Again, or another opinion is you actually can sell it to a non-Jew. So the Gemara says, what is the actual law? The halacha is that if it's real yayin nesech, remember, we made a distinction. There's wine where you know for sure was used for idolatry, that if it gets mixed with other wine, the whole thing is forbidden. If it's stam yenam, which means it's the wine of a non-Jew, but you don't know if it was used for idolatry. So then again, if the wine got mixed with my wine, you can sell that wine. Okay, next Mishnah. Let's say you have a stone wine press, right? Again, the way they used to make wine, there was stone. If anyone is ever in our neighborhood, we have these wine presses all over, like from the time of the temple. It's basically a very large area of bedrock. So let's say you have a stone wine press. If a non-Jew covered it with pitch, and if you remember, the way they used to steal the pitch was by pouring some wine in it. So then you have to clean it. It's called niguv, which means you have to dry it or clean it. If it's a wood wine press, then niguv is okay. Or no, you actually have to peel the pitch off of the wine press. If the wine press is made out of cheres, out of earthenware, out of clay, it is forbidden even if you peel the pitch off of it, right? Again, we're talking about the porous nature of each one of these substances. Okay, so now the Gemara explains, if, let's say, the idolater just pressed grapes in it, so then it's okay. You don't need to, you don't have to do niguv. That's fine. If he added pitch and then crushed grapes in it, so then niguv, right, washing it out is not enough. And then let's say you have the wine press, the ladle, the funnel. If all of these things are made out of clay of a non-Jew, maybe you can just do niguv. The Gemara says, no, that's not enough, and it's always forbidden. But the barrels and the pitchers actually absorb more than the wine press. Again, it makes sense because the barrels and the pitchers are there for storage. If it's storing the wine, it's obviously going to absorb the wine much more, and therefore niguv is not enough. Okay. Another source says you can actually kasher the wine press by pouring hot water over it. So the Gemara says, well, wait a minute, what about niguv? What is niguv? So there's an opinion that says that it's done with water. Another opinion says it's done with ashes. And then the Gemara says, wait a minute, water but not ashes, or ashes but not water? So the Gemara says, no, right on Daf 75. Rav says it means water and ashes, or maybe it means ashes and then water, right? What is the order of how you clean out this wine press? So they say, right, when the wine press is wet, so then you do ashes and then water. And if it's dry, first you do water and then ashes. Or another opinion is you actually do 3 or 4 or 5 different steps: water, ashes, ashes, water, or water, ashes, water, ashes. So the Gemara goes through different opinions. Let's say you have a wine press or an olive press. The boards need to be washed. The nets need niguv, which is more than just washing. Things made out of reeds, you need to wait till the next season, meaning like it totally has to dry. Or you can boil them in water, or you can actually put them in flowing water. Right? Also, they talk about the filters that are made out of like hair. It's not very absorbent, therefore you can wash it. If it's made out of wool, you do niguv. If it's made out of linen, you have to wait 12 months. Okay, so next Mishnah, the Torah describes when the Jewish people in the desert went to war against the non-Jews and they won that war, they bring back all the spoils. And then the Torah says how to kasher, right, each one of these types of utensils to make them kosher for use. So that's what we're going to talk about here. The verses teach how each utensil is kashered, right? And it depends how it's used, right? The rule is it's kashered the way it's used, right? Meaning, is it something that's used for cold, therefore you can just wash it? If it's used with hot water, so you have to kasher it with hot water. If it's used with fire, you have to use fire. Okay, right? So the Gemara says that if something was used for cold, so then you can just put it in the mikvah, and then it's fine. If it was used with hot, you have to do what's called hagala. Hagala is where you put the vessel into hot water. If it's used with fire, you have to do libun. Libun is using fire. Yes, as Zohar just mentioned, this is how we kasher for Pesach as well. It's the same idea. And and the spit needs libun, and a knife you can scrape the edges. So now the Gemara is going to explain that after you kasher it, you have to put it in the mikvah, and that is based on a verse. Okay, and once you put it in the mikvah, you can use it. Every new utensil that's bought from a non-Jew needs to be put into the mikvah if it's used for food preparation, right? This is what we do nowadays. There's something called a kelim mikvah, a mikvah for utensils, and therefore if you buy a new knife, a frying pan, peeler, right? Whenever you buy a new utensil that is going to be used for food, you need to immerse it in the mikvah. There are separate laws in terms of what it's made out of, right? So metal and glass go to the mikvah. If it's glazed, so that we also say you put it in the mikvah, but without a blessing. If it's plastic or earthenware, you do not have to put it in the mikvah. Okay, let's say you borrowed something from a non-Jew, that does not have to go into the mikvah because it's not yours. Again, we said if it's metal, so the Gemara is now going to say it, right? Metal utensils based on the verse need to go into the mikvah. Glass, they actually used to melt it down and fix it. Therefore, it also goes into the mikvah. If it's earthenware with a lead coating, so then it needs to go into the mikvah. If it's not coated, it does not have to go to the mikvah. Okay, cups, ladles, jugs, you can wash them, again, because they're used with cold, and then you put them in the mikvah, and they're fine. Pots, urns, need hagala. Again, pots are used on the fire with hot water. And then the mikvah, and then it's fine. Shipudim, like skewers, or the grill needs libun, right? You have to actually like blow torch it, and then mikvah, and then it is okay. If a Jew used it before koshering it, it is forbidden, or again, maybe it's okay based on what flavor is in the pot. If it's something that, if it doesn't have any flavor in it, so then it would be okay. Daf 76, last daf of the Masechet. Okay, the only thing that's forbidden is, again, according to the Torah, is a pot that was cooked, that non-kosher food was cooked in it that day. The rabbis made a decree that even if it wasn't used that day, it still remains forbidden. Let's say you have a spit or a grill that was used for sacrificial meat, right? Meat from the temple. Now, what's the catch with this meat? So it's permitted to eat today, but sacrificial meat, which we'll learn, this is a good segue, we're going to learn about in a few weeks. We're going to learn that different sacrifices needed to be finished by a certain amount of time. All of them need to be eaten by a certain amount of time, just that time varies based on the sacrifice. If it is left over past that time, it becomes what's called notar. And if it's notar or nosar, it is forbidden. And therefore, the Gemara says that if you have a grill that was used for this meat, you can kasher it by using hot water. But we said that a grill, the way to kasher it from non-kosher is by blowtorching it, libun, by using hot heat. So the Gemara says, why is there a difference? Maybe there isn't a difference. Maybe when we said hot water, we meant hot water and then libun, so then it would be the same. And maybe both of them need both. Or no, maybe there's a difference between chodshim, right, the sacrificial meat, and non-kosher, because every day. It's in the temple, right? They were doing barbecues every day. So when they're grilling, right, the next day, they're already burning off the let's say the oils or the flavor of the meat from the day before, and therefore it never becomes notar and it never becomes forbidden. The Gemara says, well, that is only depends on what sacrifice we're talking about, right? Some sacrifices already the next day they are forbidden. So the Gemara says, you're right. It has to be that it was used for something that is permissible for 2 days, and therefore every day that you're grilling new meat, it would be permissible. The Gemara says maybe there's a difference between, let's say, the non-kosher pots, right? That's not something that they used every day, and therefore you actually do need to do libun. You have to blowtorch it because the flavor is actually stuck in the wall. Another distinction could be that when the flavor went in for non-kosher, it's already forbidden. But for the kachim, for the sacrificial meat, when the flavor goes in, it's permitted, it's mutar. Only the next day does it become forbidden. And therefore, maybe that is the distinction. Okay, how do we do each one of these things? Libun, you have to remove the outer layer by using heat, what we call either red hot or white hot. It has to be super hot, and then it is kosher. What is hagala? So you basically take the pot that you want to make kosher, and you put it into a pot of boiling water. What do you do with a large pot? How do you kasher that? So the Gemara says you basically like raise the lip of the pot, you pour water in, you boil it up, and then it overflows over the edge, and therefore it kashers the pot, right? And the term in the Gemara about kashering, the rule is kibul-o kach polto. What does that mean? The way that the flavor was absorbed, bul-o means to absorb, right? Actually means like to swallow, right? So the way the flavor was absorbed is the way that we get rid of it, polto, right? We spit it out, right? So again, if it was used with hot water, you get rid of it with hot water. If it's used with fire, you get rid of it with fire. How do you kasher a knife? The Gemara talks about thrusting it into dirt 10 times, actually into 10 like different spaces in the ground. And when it goes in and out of the ground, again, it has to be like tough. It can't be like in your, like a loose dirt. It has to be like really hard. And the idea is that every time it goes in and out of the soil is actually cleaning the knife from all of the oils and the residue. The knife actually has to be smooth. It can't have any nicks, right? If it has any nicks, we assume that the flavor kind of went in and was absorbed as well. And the Gemara ends with a very interesting story about 2 Jews eating with a Persian king, Shur Malka, and the Persian king cuts a piece of an etrog and gives it to one of the Jews, and then he like kashers the knife, and then he gives it to the other Jew. And the first Jew says, hey, what about me? Don't you know that I also keep kosher? And he says, look, I don't know you, so I don't know what you keep and what you don't keep, so I gave you, before I kashered it, but this guy I know. And another ending of the story was that the king says to him, well, I know what you did last night, and therefore I figured that you don't keep kosher. And the commentaries explain that it was the Persian custom that the night before you met with the king would send some beautiful women to your room. And the king was saying, I know that those women went into your room last night. And therefore, if you're not careful about this, I assumed you're not careful about that. And that is the end of the Masechet. And I think I want to share, a word or two, and then I would love to hear your thoughts as we finish this Masechet. I think, on one hand, that last story is really crazy. On the other hand, I think it is exactly what this Masechet was all about, right? The Masechet was about our interactions with non-Jews. And number one, we have to be very careful, I think, of the way we present ourselves, the way we behave, because we should see that everybody's looking all the time. Now, I know it's not about what people see, and it's really about what we do, but people do jump to conclusions. And we see that even at the end of the Masechet, right? Why are these Jews eating with this Persian king, right? Meaning we see that throughout the ages, there have always been interactions between the Jews and the non-Jews. And I really think this Masechet is trying to teach us a way to limit that interaction. Again, to be wary of those interactions. They tend to cause trouble. They can be quite problematic. And I think that I hope that I think this Masechet is really just fascinating. As I said, a lot of things are not as applicable because we don't really have idolatry nowadays. On the other hand, a lot of things are applicable. On the other hand, a lot of things are applicable nowadays in terms of koshering, in terms of, we learned a lot of fundamental laws in terms of mixtures and what is kosher and what is not. So those are my thoughts. I'd love, we have a few minutes, so if anybody would like to share something from this, what they feel they gained from this Masechet, I'm happy to open up the floor.
Remember when you're drinking to the straw. Totally understand why you shouldn't drink from a straw from a kosher wine or unkosher. The whole thing was non-Jews. But then at the very end you said, well, it teaches us we shouldn't drink wine with non-Jews. Is that kosher wine with non-Jews, or just don't drink wine with non-Jews?
Okay, great question. So there is exactly, right? The case that we had was literally drinking with non-Jews. I meant it more philosophically. I think the idea, if you remember, in the middle of the Masechet, we talked about trying to maintain a distance between us and the non-Jews. And one way that you do that is by not going to the bar with them, by not, engaging in certain activities with the non-Jews. Again, I'm not saying that you can't go with your business colleagues to the bar to get a drink once in a while. That's not what I'm talking about. But again, as we saw, the closer you get with these idolaters, the more dangerous things became. So I think that's what I meant. I meant more philosophically.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Ilanit.
Yeah, so after all that profound wrap up and all that beauty and that I'm here to bring the comic relief that okay, we're finishing, and at this point I'm going to ask you how to pronounce Avodah Zara. You are pronouncing it that way, so that is obviously correct. The right emphasis on the end of the syllables, etc. But I hear so many people call it Avodah Zara. So can you explain what is correct and why?
Yes. Avodah Zara is, I would say, either the English pronunciation of the word,
rather the Yiddish one,
or the Yiddish, exactly, the Yiddish pronunciation, right? Like I said, there's like I say notar, right, with a taf, but you probably heard it as nosar, right? Nosar,
Mhm.
because in the Yiddish pronunciation, they would say sa. In, I would say, modern Hebrew, we say ta, right? So notar, right? Avodah Zara. That is the Hebrew pronunciation. In the Yiddish pronunciation, they would say Avoda Zara, right? Lashon hara,
Mhm.
right? As opposed to Lashon hara. So correct. Yeah, thank you. People, the pronunciation is different, but the idea is the same.
I also wanted, you mentioned that there's not so much Avodah Zarah nowadays, but if you think about Buddhism, that's still
Yes.
Avodah Zarah.
No, there
And
is a lot of
people can also say Catholicism as well, because they're also bowing down
there,
to a statue.
yeah,
And you
there
said
is
that
a lot.
Christianity was idolatry. You
Yes,
did.
there is a lot.
You know, no.
Yeah, there is a lot. Definitely in the Far East, there is a lot. My point was that if if you work in downtown Manhattan, I would say, like, it's not the same thing.
Right.
But I agree, there is Avodah Zarah still in this world, right? Catholicism problematic, but yeah.
So it's not all, at least it's not all Christianity, but Catholicism definitely.
You know, the word Zohar comes across your mouth, and since I'm a lip reader, could you lift your head up and say it again? Thank you.
Okay, so can you see me better now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I'm saying it's not just, it's not all Christianity, it's Catholicism, because from what I understand, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that the Protestants don't bow down to idols, and they don't have
No,
all
but they
these figures.
pray to a person that walked the face of the earth. I'm really confused about the whole thing.
It is problematic.
Yeah.
There are those who
Yeah.
say that if you believe in the Trinity, that is multiple gods. So
I don't know.
it is, right?
It's
It is problematic.
Okay,
Yeah,
here's a
and they have wine.
Whereas Islam is not.
Here's a
Right?
short
Islam is
question
not.
about remember that you said you didn't call is it called a puta? A coin that's not worth much.
Pruta.
If a Jew picks it up, it's not stealing. I don't
It-
understand that.
Okay, so interestingly enough, the Gemara explains that because the non-Jews have 7 commandments, right? The 7 Noahide laws, they're actually more stringent in a way than our laws. Meaning
Okay.
for us, right? Stealing it has to be worth a certain amount. Again, a minimal amount, but if I steal your dirty tissue, that's not called stealing.
Okay.
But
All right.
whereas if the non-Jew did, it would be considered stealing, meaning it is more stringent
Okay.
because they have 7 and we have 613.
Thank you.
Amazing. Okay, well, wishing everyone a mazal tov for finishing this amazing Masechet. We have 2 weeks of Masechet Horayot. With that, we finish all of Seder Nezikin. We are, right, Nezikin being damages. This has been a very long, this is from Baba Kama. I don't even remember when that was. I would say probably 2 years, maybe. I don't know if someone can look it up. But it's been a while. Also, if you are interested, we're going to be doing a special class with the other teachers of Daf Yomi. I think it's on Sunday night. I want to say September 14th, maybe.
Okay.
You can look on Web Yeshiva. We're going to be doing kind of like a summary of the whole Seder. Hopefully I'll remember what we learned in the past year and a half by then. But you are all invited to that as well.
I saw that the last time. It was very good. I can recommend it.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually really, really enjoyed the last time we did it. So we said we would do it again.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'll remember things by then. So wishing everyone a Shavua Tov and a Shabbat Shalom. And see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.